Chapter 2. Secrets. To Merlin's relief, they returned home the slow way, the van rattling along muddy roads that soon deteriorated into woodland tracks as they took a detour to avoid the Thrallstone. Every pothole jolted Merlin out of his seat, almost making him glad about his empty stomach. By the time they reached the lodge, he felt as if he'd been trampled by a herd of wild unicorns. But he kept his mouth shut, because no matter how many bruises he ended up with, it was better than being transported by a spell. As soon as they pulled up, his father called Claudia the fish. The two casters, who liked to call themselves spell mages, then disappeared into the cellar with the girl's spider. Merlin sighed. He had no idea what Claudia and his father did down there. But whenever Claudia went down there, they were gone for hours. It looked as if he'd have to make his own lunch again. He crept past the shed where his father's goshawk lived and made himself a large pile of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, which he took into his room. Shivering, he pulled on an extra sweater. Then he crossed his fingers and turned on his computer. The lodge was a terrible place to live. 5 miles from civilization. It had no TV, no telephone, and no heating, except smoky open fires when someone bothered to light them. Water had to be drawn from an ancient well in the overgrown garden. There was a cesspool which stank in hot weather and was probably the reason none of the Spellclave ever did much gardening. Electricity came from a generator in the cellar, its output strictly controlled by Hawk. Sometimes there was power for Merlin's computer, more often not. If he did something that annoyed his father, the power could be off for days, and he'd be reduced to reading his computer magazines by candlelight. Today, though, there was a comforting whir, and colored light from the monitor flickered across the tightly shuttered windows, old dark furnitures and bare floorboards. Merlin's eyes fell on the stack of magazines on his bed, and for the first time that day he grinned. On top of the magazines was a new game. Eagerly, he ripped off the wrapping and loaded it up. None of the monsters were half as terrifying as his father in a bad mood. But it was so long since he'd had anything new to play. He forgot the time and was soon lost on a quest in which he was the hero, strong and brave. A chill breeze across the back of his neck snatched him back to reality. Quickly, he grabbed the computer mouse and exited. Hawk stood in the doorway, scowling at the screen. Merlin made the computer beep a few times, hoping it might make his father go away. Apart from Claudia, who used to be some kind of scientist before his father found her and brought her here to the lodge, all the Spellclave were wary of his computer. Technology was supposed to interfere with Spellmage's power. Merlin didn't care. What Merlin really wanted was to get on the internet, and the faster it drained his power, the better, because then his father would have no excuse to hurt Red-Eye. The silence was getting to him. He made the computer beep again, and the hawk-headed stick rested on his shoulder. A gentle threat. Stop that. Merlin gripped the mouse harder and swallowed. New game? His father questioned, was deceptively mild. Yes? Who gave it to you? I don't know. A chuckle. Do you and Claudia really think I don't know what goes on behind my back in my own Spellclave? No, yes, Merlin swallowed again. The last thing he wanted was to get Claudia into trouble and lose his supply of magazines and games. None of the others would dare defy Hawk so openly. You don't know what you mean, do you? Stop trembling, boy. I'm not angry with you. You're not? Merlin waited for the stick to leave his shoulder, but it stroked his ear, making him cringe. You did quite well today. Praise? Merlin tensed. His father couldn't come in here just for that. Something more was coming. Now that we've got her familiar, we'll soon have the girl. I've sent Claudia to watch her house. The little lady should be more cooperative now, but we'll get her one way or the other. When she arrives, I want you to talk to her. Find out how much she knows. Show her Red-Eye. You'll let me have Red-Eye back? It was as if the sun had risen in his room. Merlin twisted in his chair and searched his father's face. But there was no kindness there. The yellow eyes regarded him in amusement as their owner caressed the head of his beloved stick. If you get results, I might let you visit him in the cellar. Merlin's heart sank again. The cellar? Dark, airless, where no one could hear you scream. I'll do my best, he whispered. Hawk smiled. Of course you will, because you know what'll happen to Red-Eye if you don't. Now then, why don't you tell me what went wrong in the supermarket? That spell flash must have been visible from the other side of Earthhaven. No point worrying about getting it back now. A dead spell's no use to anyone. His boots echoed on the bare boards as he began to pace the room. Earthhaven spell mages bring dead spells back to life, Merlin mouthed, but he didn't quite have the guts to say it out loud. Every time his father passed behind his chair, the back of his neck prickled. Well, I'm waiting. What's your excuse this time? He considered lying, then changed his mind. Raising his chin slightly, he said, I used it to transport her spider out of her pocket. Hawk stopped pacing and laughed out loud. Don't be silly. You couldn't transport a flea if it hopped half the distance itself. If you're going to lie to me, at least make it halfway believable. You need 2 spells to transport, 1 at each end. I must have told you that 1,000 times. Merlin bit his lip. I kept the old one, the one you told me to recycle, he admitted. It wasn't quite dead, and I thought it might be useful. In truth, he'd forgotten the spell. He'd been so anxious to get the girls familiar. But his father didn't need to know that. I didn't have time to think, he rushed on. So I don't know. I don't know how it happened. But you're always telling me to stop analyzing magic and just do it. So maybe that's why it worked. Silence behind him. He twisted in his chair and saw Hawk frowning, stroking a stick. This changes things, his father said slowly. So she cast it herself, did she? Was she trying to get rid of you? I wouldn't blame her, but I thought she didn't know who we were. If she suspects the truth about her mother's death, it could make things complicated. Tell me exactly what happened. Did she know what she was doing? So, the girl had lost her mother too? Merlin thrust away the memories of his own mother's death and thought of the surge of power he'd felt when he touched the spell. It must have been the power of a casting. I cast it, he said, less sure now. Hawk's lips pressed tight. I thought I told you not to lie to me. You can't even cast illusions, let alone transport. Then maybe it was both of us, like we combined our powers or something. And for a second, doubt flickered in the yellow eyes. Then his father laughed again. You're such an idiot. Only a spell lord can transfer power like that. That's one thing you'll never be, my boy. Neither will that girl, not with a stupid spider for a familiar. Even in Earthhaven, becoming a spell lord is a lifetime's work. Out here, it's an honor achieved only by those of us willing to risk all. He chuckled nastily. When my spellclave's complete, maybe I'll show you what a power transference really feels like. Merlin shuddered. For now, though, Hawk went on, no longer laughing. I don't like being lied to. You never learn, do you? The door slammed. After a moment, Merlin's computer turned itself off, with a sigh like a dying animal, and shadows rushed at him from the cobwebby corners of the room. He clenched his fists, part in frustration, part in fear. I wasn't lying, he whispered to the dark screen. I did cast that spell. I did.